What I would like to do now is I would like to introduce this section on our past pitches and our network action teams. So as you all know, Vermont has a major moral imperative, economic opportunity, and legal requirement to achieve our 2025, 2030, and 2050 energy and greenhouse gas emissions reduction commitments in ways that create a more just, thriving, and sustainable future for Vermonters. To that end, EAN solicits pitches each year for promising opportunities to help Vermont rapidly, cost-effectively, and equitably reduce fossil fuel use and greenhouse gas pollution. During this part of the day, we will get to hear about the work that has happened on the pitches that were selected in the last couple years. We're going to start with two that were selected a couple of years ago, which are Next Generation Mobility and Access for Rural Vermonters and Zero Energy Now. And then I'll come back up and we will switch into the 2020 network action teams. So it's going to take me one moment to get Sue up on the screen, and then we will be ready to hear from Sue Minter about Next Generation Mobility and Access for Rural Vermonters. Sue, give me one moment. Sue, can you go ahead and speak?
Hi, this is Sue Minter joining you again, not too far away from Waterbury Center, Vermont, where it is not yet raining. Could you hear me? Great. I'll keep going. Hi, everybody. I am here to update you on a pitch that we first presented in 2019, that time before COVID. This is actually a slide from that pitch, which is now called the EV Mobility and Equity Project. Next slide. And the vision for that project, as we originally conceived of it, and by the way, it was conceived from an event, a large event where we gathered people with lived experience together to brainstorm around key challenges to helping people in their poverty. And this was a big idea that came out of that day. We paid for people to be there, we compensated them and fed them. And this was the great idea that I'm hoping to continue forward. It looks at both addressing access and mobility for people who cannot afford a car, and for whom our public transit system is not adequate, and who are literally trapped in poverty. So how do we expand access and mobility while transforming our fleet to electric vehicles? So the vision is a shared fleet of all electric vehicles to do multiple things to help people access healthcare, work, childcare, and food. Next slide, please. We've made a lot of progress since you gave us the confidence to actually take this idea forward. I want to especially thank our key first funders, the High Meadows Fund and Vermont Community Foundation, along with VLight, and subsequently the Vermont Agency of Transportation through their mobility, transportation, and innovation grants have all helped us move forward expeditiously while in the middle of COVID, when Capstone Community Action has been on steroids in every direction we serve. So we have been building a great project team. I'm on it in Capstone, as well as Paul Zabriskie and Amanda Carlson, who you'll meet later today, but also the firm of RSG, Resource Systems Group, and Chris Cole, my old buddy from VTrans, who formerly ran CCTA, brings great talent and ideas to this team. We most recently were able to conduct a mobility study, which I'll explain a little bit more. But most importantly, we're also forming key partnerships with social service organizations, with our hospital, healthcare service providers, as well as major employers who can't get people to work because they don't have transportation. Next slide. One of the many important pieces that our mobility study looked at. We had focus groups, stakeholder groups, but also a survey. What's unique about this survey is we focused on people who are facing challenges, economic challenges and mobility challenges through the networks with whom we coordinate social services. We have a collaborative action network, and we really push this survey both through Front Porch Forum, incredible, thank you, Front Porch Forum, but also these networks. And what we know is the respondents, statistically significant number, 420, but it's somewhat unique for a transportation study, and RSG works across the country and validated that because we have a high participation from people with low and moderate incomes. And what you see is we knew it. 35% of our respondents have unmet needs. We've got people, a high percentage with people with disabilities, without consistent access, either doing because they lack a car or the ability to afford to fix a car. And 15% don't even own a car. Next slide. So we know from all of this research and foundational work that our idea is well-founded, the people want it, and now we're moving forward. Next slide. Our next steps are really to look at the technology. How do we have an app that is a shared use system? We want to build an app that actually builds upon the existing public transit system, especially the one called My Ride in Montpelier, which is a project of VTrans. We don't want to displace or disrupt our public transit system. We want to build upon it for the late night hours. I just got a call from the congressional office. How do we help get people from the emergency department after midnight? It doesn't exist as an option. We need to look at fleet management because we are looking at operating a major fleet of cars, all electric cars. We need to look at developing actually a whole new nonprofit to really take ownership of this with its separate board of directors and governance structure separate from Capstone. We have a long history of incubating other nonprofits like the Food Bank and Downstreet. We need to have a better detail of our business model. And most importantly, we need to raise $1 million. And this is where you come in. Next slide. We were somewhat disappointed that, whoops, go on back. We did not get we were disappointed but not discouraged that we were unsuccessful at a bid for an earmark. That was going to really jumpstart us forward. But what we did get was the initiative to continue. And we are now needing to raise the first $1 million. And we're hoping people in this room will contact me after, or Amanda, to talk about how you can invest in this project that's going to ensure mobility and access for people who right now are trapped in poverty, to really show the world that we can build this bridge. We can advance our climate agenda and our equity, anti-poverty agenda at the same time. Thank you. I hope I made it in 5 minutes. Have a great day. Feel free to contact me. I'll put my information in the chat, or Amanda Carson is there, and you'll learn more later. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Sue. And thank you to folks in the room who are having a little bit of audio trouble at the beginning there. Most of the rest of the day is going to happen in the room, so hopefully we won't have the same issues that we've had so far. I'm going to hand this over to Tom Perry now, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Zero Energy Now program.
This podium is a little tight. Bear with me for a moment. I've got also to click on 2 pointers. Okay, good. Good afternoon. I'm Tom Perry. Can you all hear me when I'm back here? I'm here to speak for the Zero Energy Now program, whose primary sponsor is Building Performance Professionals Association of Vermont. We're very grateful for the support we've received through the Energy Action Network, and we're pleased to be able to bring you this update. There we go. This summer, we've been receiving quite a few messages from the climate. I think Vermonters are getting those messages. If it can get to 120 degrees in British Columbia, it can get to 120 degrees in Vermont, and it can do it next year. I'm concerned, however, about the message we are sending both to ourselves and, more importantly, everyone else. It looks like this. These are all good messages. None of them are wrong or inconsistent or really problematic in any way. But here's the thing. There is one message that is notably not there. This. It's a pretty uncomplicated message, but for some reason, excuse me, this. It's a pretty uncomplicated message, but for some reason, we're not saying it. We're not really getting it out there. And yet, to meet our 2050 goal, this is the deal. This is what has to happen, and this brings us to Zero Energy Now. Zero Energy Now is a program that is designed entirely to do just that. Zero Energy Now, in fact, does two really important things. It gets homes off of fossil fuel, and it directly links and can drive the existing market to our 2050 goals. Zen brings together key elements of the market: contractors, technology, financing, utilities, and it also brings together existing programs: weatherization, heat pumps, biomass, solar. All those messages you saw earlier are united in Zen. All their incentives are leveraged by Zen. Zen puts these programs and opportunities in front of homeowners and provides a clear, coherent path that guides them into a post-fossil energy future. I want to show you just a handful of examples. I'm not going to talk about them much. Look at the net monthly cost. That's the additional amount of money required to get this house off of fossil fuel. And this house, in this case, net monthly savings, $72. Look at the total project costs there, $39,000. Hard to tell people to spend that kind of money to get off of fossil fuel. The $72 in savings doesn't sound so bad. And another one, net monthly costs, $36.98. 100% renewable, zero carbon emissions. Zen is spectacularly successful on a house-by-house basis, but it's a tough sell. Design-specific, crazy high sticker price, financing, debt, all these things generate hesitation in homeowners, and that's something contractors who have to do this work really want to avoid. We need the contractors to get the work done, We need to overcome this hesitation somehow and build momentum. We have to create a demand for Zen. People need to know they have to get off of fossil fuel. They need to know how to do it. They need to ask for it. Contractors will come in and will do this work, and the market will begin to move in this direction. It starts with creating that demand. Then we have to create the capacity for Zen, which other people are going to be talking about soon. The workforce, the weatherization at scale is a hugely critical infrastructure development program for Zen. And it's Zen people are working on it, and I'm going to continue here because I'm running out of time. So in order to create all these things, we really need help, and we need help beyond the small group that's been working on this program so far. We need a dedicated group of active advisors, people from the finance industry, from fundraising, from utilities, policy development, regulators, marketing professionals. All these people need to work on developing this demand and this capacity. I'm getting confused between my pointers here. We need continued funding as well. Zen is the effective link that coordinates all our efforts towards getting off fossil fuel and meeting our 2050 goal. But Zen is not a slam dunk, and it will not survive on its own, not yet. We need your help. Thank you. Oh, I do have, yes, sorry.
Thank you to Sue Minter and to Tom Perry for letting us know a little bit about those pitches that were selected a couple of years ago. We're now going to hear from the 4 that were selected in 2020. So starting last year, we implemented a network action team model after the pitches to bring together many EAN network members and partners to work on the pitch concepts in a much more concerted and networked way. So I would like to invite Peggy O'Neill Vivanco, Jennifer Wallace-Broder, Neil Lunderville, and Chris Nemi to come up and sit. We actually have 2 of them here already. They're so ahead of the game. I love it. Neil and Chris could join them as well. I actually wanted them to be standing at this moment because along with Linda McGinnis, Richard Fazy, and Richard Cowart, these folks have really guided some amazing efforts over the past year. And I would like to give them a little applause as the chairs and co-chairs of these network actions. And in fact, more than 130 people have been involved in the network action team work over the past 9 months or so, giving literally thousands of hours of work to what you're going to hear about over the next 20 minutes. So I wish that I could actually name everyone who's been involved in this work, but let it suffice for me to express my deep gratitude for all that they have done. And I'm really excited to let you all hear about the work that's been accomplished over the last 9 months, starting with Peggy and the Replace Your Ride program.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Cara. So Replace Your Ride, we really hit the ground running. Some of us did not meet in person ever until last month, thanks to Jared and Cara. This really talks a lot about what Sue Minter mentioned, what Keisha mentioned, and what Virginia mentioned about equity in transportation. This program is tackling transportation poverty while accelerating emission reductions. The idea is that we have these stackable incentives. We're building on Mileage Smart that Sue Minter had mentioned earlier with Capstone, and adding a scrappage piece to it. So we scrap an old vehicle that's 10 years or older, that is high mileage, poor efficiency, and we're replacing it with clean transportation options. The idea is that we get these older polluting vehicles off the road, and that the options include new or used EVs, hybrid electric vehicles, shared use mobility, transit passes. This is before fare free transit. So some of these other concepts, options are still evolving. But we're moving forward with this stackable incentive. So it can add on to the state incentive and the utility incentive and any of the incentives for low and moderate income Vermonters. Little population there. You can even get electric bikes with the eventual incentive, electric motorcycles. Those are not as well baked right now, but this is the concept. As many of you have heard, graphs and information from EAN show that low and moderate income Vermonters have spent a higher percentage of their income on transportation. So this is to reduce transportation poverty and have our low and moderate residents spend less of their income just to get to work. A third of the cars in Vermont are older than 2010, and I'm sure many of us in this room have an old car. The action so far, we hit the ground running and really accelerated this project with the support of EAN. I cannot tell you, those who are putting pitches forth today, EAN is an excellent partner. Cara was fantastic in helping to set up our advisory group meetings and keeping us on track and organized. So this is just a quick, we went from a group of virtual strangers, literally virtually, to talk to, and Linda McGinnis, who has the energy of many, met with so many of our folks in the legislature. All of us presented at one point or another. We had VTrans also as a fantastic partner, moved through this to the point where we actually, oops, wrong. We got this into the transportation bill for this year, and it passed with for $1.5 million for the Replace Your Ride pilot. Right now, or in the next couple of weeks, the RFP will be going out for a program administrator. So our job as the network action team was to develop this, come up with who were the viable partners, move this concept beyond a concept into what can be implemented, what are the pieces that we need. We came up with a ton of questions, a lot more questions than answers now. But the idea is that I keep using like a midwife. We're kind of giving birth to this in a way to the eventual administrator, to the program, with all the research that we have done, all the outreach we have done, and with a list of questions that still need answers. So later this fall, a contract will be reached with the administrator, the eventual administrator, with the hope of having the program up and running in 2022. Now, we don't have all the pieces together. We'll roll out the vehicle piece first. As I mentioned, there's also electric bikes and electric motorcycles and ride share and transit and so forth. We're starting with what we know, and that's that stackable incentive for vehicle purchases, new and used. But this steering committee and our advisory group, I think, is really important. We didn't have this when we first started. We had reached out to folks early on, and so we had some a good foundation. But with each of these different components, we reached out to different groups, and we met with the regional planning commissions. We met with the transit agencies, we met with bike and ped advocates to figure out how do we reach the end users. We need to have the equity piece baked in, to this process, so our end users are really informing what's going on with the process. So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much to Energy Action Network and to all of you.
Thank you, Peggy. I'd like to invite Jennifer Wallace-Broder to the stage to talk about the future of rural transit.
Oops, I'm too fast. Hello, everyone. I am really excited to share what's going on with this project. When we made our pitch last year, there was a small group of very innovative and dedicated women who had really had this very ambitious idea about combining school transportation and public transportation to better serve Vermonters, and had done a lot of research and got to the point where we could make a pitch, and we were very fortunate to get selected. And with that support, we've been able to advance this concept and bring a lot of very interesting people into this project. So we have a very modest vision to prepare Vermont to have the most efficient, equitable, and cost-effective rural transportation system in the United States. So we're a small state, but we all know we can do great things, and we're not shy about our vision. And really the idea is something that's been around for a long time. Many of you have probably had this thought. We have school buses traveling around many parts of the state of Vermont. We have a public transportation system. We're basically funding two public transportation systems, and they serve different populations. So what could we achieve if we brought these two public systems together to better serve students and communities across the state of Vermont? So this, as I said, has been a concept that's been thought of, it's been studied before. One of the things that was really key to moving this idea forward was to decide what's the underlying system that we're going to build from. So rather than putting the public on school buses, we made a strategic decision to look at putting students on public transit as the underlying system. And that was a real breakthrough for us in thinking strategically about this. So much like many of the network action teams, we have a really strong group of people leading the project, as well as advising the process. So I'm happy to answer some of these acronyms on the advisory committee, but we have utilities at the table, transit agencies, regional planning commissions, and a number of advocacy organizations that have an interest in mobility in particular, and particularly people that are serving vulnerable populations in the state of Vermont, like seniors and people with disabilities. And then we have a couple of school partners that were selected through a competitive process to participate in the project: Mount Mansfield Unified Union School District and Orange East Supervisory Union. So these are the goals that we are working on for this year. We've obviously been working with a lot of stakeholders to get input, particularly at the local level, but also engaging statewide organizations that have information to share with us. There is combined service in some parts of the state. Burlington is one that I think people might be most familiar with. But we also learned that there's other places where transit is serving school transportation needs. Sharon Academy is a great example of that. Thetford Academy, I think, also takes advantage of Tri-Valley Transit Service. So we definitely were excited to learn more about how those came about. As I mentioned, we wanted to identify a couple places in Vermont where we could test this idea out, starting with a cost and benefit analysis to really understand whether this is feasible and what the benefits might be to the community. So we went through a competitive process and selected those two regions that I just mentioned. We're in the midst of that process right now, where we're analyzing a couple of routes that we think are promising. Once we get through that process, we're going to say, is this feasible or not? We're hoping it is. And then we're going to start to think about how we might design a pilot program to test this out. And then eventually we're going to try to secure funding through VTrans to set up pilot locations, pilot routes. So what's happened, I kind of went through a lot of this, but we did get funding from VTrans. Thank you very much to my VTrans friends for helping us fund this project, and EAN. We've been gathering, as I mentioned, information. We selected the school districts and we've been researching these models. We've identified promising routes. We have started to collaborate with Green Mountain Transit and Tri-Valley Transit, who serve those regions. We've applied for additional funding in FY22. And then what's next? We're hoping to complete the feasibility study. That's going to be done actually probably by the end of this month. We're going to disseminate those findings to particularly to the communities, but also to the statewide stakeholders. We're going to move into more community engagement because that's a key component to getting new pilot routes established, is a strong community buy-in for those routes. We'll continue to work on the pilot program. We'll be looking at opportunities for electrification because that's a key piece of this. And for anybody that's living in those two regions that I mentioned, we would love to have you as a part of the process. Or if you have any constituencies that are in those regions, please let me know, because that community engagement and outreach is going to be critical next. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm aware that we are going to run out of our Q&A time again. The governor is joining us via Zoom at 1:30, so we have just enough time to hear from the Clean Heat Standard and from Weatherization at Scale. We do have some time later in the agenda when we'll have time for Q&A about pitches and for some conversations. So we're going to have to hold our Q&A for that. I apologize. But I do want to let you hear from Richard Cowart about the Clean Heat Standard. This is by video. He's not able to join us today. I also wanted to say that this is just a 5-minute piece. We will be doing a webinar about this as well in October. So watch for that date and you can hear more about this then as well.
This is Rich Coward on behalf of the Clean Heat Working Group. And I'm here today to speak with you very briefly about a powerful tool to help attack climate pollution in Vermont, the Clean Heat Standard. Heat represents over 1/3 of Vermont's climate emissions. And as we know from climate science and from our own legislation, large reductions are needed in those emissions. And some of that has to happen really quickly. We need to minimize bills in households that are burdened by high heating costs. Changing out heating systems is not something that you can just inject at the transmission level. It involves customers individually making decisions, and the changeover in the building stock is slow. Heating systems last a long time, buildings last even longer. This is not something that is easy to accomplish. We're convinced after a year of study that we can put into place a policy called the Clean Heat Standard that could in fact deliver the change that we need in this sector. The Clean Heat Standard would be a performance standard to deliver an increasing percentage of clean heat solutions in Vermont locations. And the standard would be imposed upon those who are providing fossil fuels at the wholesale level. The standard is measured by progress at the customer level. It's not a theoretical construct, it's a practical building by building mandate that is delivered by giving choices to providers and to customers. We have a range of options available that starts with weatherization, and weatherization is a key partner to the Clean Heat Standard. And it includes the provision of renewable fuels, which could be biodiesels, biogas, or district heat. Electric heat will be a big part of the solution. And in Vermont, advanced wood heat, including pellet stoves and wood chip boilers, can be important solutions as well. Heating providers would have the opportunity to deliver any and all of those solutions, and customers would have the opportunity to choose among them. Here's a drawing that looks a little complicated, but in fact, what's represented here is rather straightforward. The legislature and the regulators in Vermont would be responsible for creating and administering the program. The obligation would be on fossil fuel wholesalers to demonstrate that they have delivered or caused to be delivered is an adequate number of clean heat solutions in the state. Just want to emphasize that these decisions are made by customers, and customers will choose how they want to heat their buildings. Among the clean heat options that they might choose, they can create credits that would then be retired by the obligated wholesale fuel providers. Clean heat standard is in fact the most equitable and the most practical approach to delivering clean heat solutions. Efficiency alone provides only about 25% of the answer. It's crucial, it's important, it's a partner to this policy, but at least 75% of the carbon reductions we need have to come from changing the fuels that we use to heat our buildings. What really needs to happen is changes in the technologies, the heating sources themselves, the fuels themselves, not trying to drive change through prices. We want to build equity into this program from the outset. And we know from experience that performance standards like the renewable energy standard in Vermont can work very well to drive change over time. Finally, I guess I would emphasize that electricity is moving towards clean in Vermont and elsewhere. And we can see that performance standards in electricity have really made a huge difference. But the fossil industries have not stepped up yet. And we really need to create a performance standard for the fossil sector and give the fossil fuel providers a pathway to evolve their business models to becoming clean heat providers and not just the commodity delivery agents for commodity fossil fuels. I want to close by thanking the members of the Clean Heat Working Group. We know from really close and careful examination of this topic over the course of a year that this can work. We're ready to propose it. We're ready to talk with stakeholders, with Vermonters generally, with the legislature, the Climate Council, in order to bring it to fruition. I know Chris Nemi is there, and I hope he'll correct my mistakes and answer your questions. So over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Neil Underhill. I'm the president and CEO of VGS, Vermont Gas. I'm one of the co-chairs of Weatherization at Scale, along with Richard Fazy from Energy Futures Group and Carl Rubicek from EAN. And I'm proud today to represent the work that we've been doing over the last year on weatherization at scale. So our goal is a big one, but it's a really important one. It's to weatherize 120 homes of low and moderate income Vermonters by the end of this decade. And when we talk about weatherization, we are talking about thermal energy efficiency for homes, how people heat their homes. We want to make sure that people are getting these efficiency improvements so that they save money, increase the comfort of their home, and of course, use less energy. This is a really key point. There are a lot of benefits to weatherization that go beyond energy and greenhouse gas emissions. We'll talk about those in a moment. But they deliver really a full stack of other benefits, which is why it's so important. It's including reducing housing costs, improving health outcomes, and providing an important measure of economic equity for folks who might not be able to participate in other parts of the energy revolution. But of course, the principal reason that we're involved in this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We see weatherization as a critical first step from switching away from fossil fuels. The less energy that you need to heat your home, the easier and more cost-effective it will be to use renewables. For our effort, we have narrowed it to 120% or less of area median income, AMI. We know that there are a lot of Vermonters above 120% AMI, but we've been focused on the folks who are going to be the hardest who are going to be the least able to put the upfront money in to get the weatherization work complete. Because we know that once the weatherization investment is made, it puts money back in the pockets of those low and moderate income Vermonters right away. So with weatherization at scale, they've talked about the weatherization. Now we're going to talk about the at scale piece. We have done a great job in Vermont putting money toward weatherization. And we have a really robust ecosystem of organizations supporting weatherization, whether it's energy counseling, energy auditing, doing the actual work, the financing part of it, et cetera. You know, despite all of this amazing work, we are still not sufficiently funding weatherization in Vermont to meet our ambitious targets. You can see from the graph here, the blue line shows what we're on pace to do. The green line here shows what we need to do. So we've got a long way to go. And this is what our work has been said about over the last year. We were one of the pitches selected at the EAN Summit last year. We came together. Over the course of the year, there have been dozens of groups involved in this important coalition. And we started early on to figure out novel ways to approach funding and finance of weatherization. We had an early win. We were supported by the governor in his budget in January, coming out with a sizable package for weatherization. But on top of that, the legislature came through with an even bigger package of weatherization, ultimately which passed more than $20 million in new weatherization funding for Vermonters. A big chunk of that went to Efficiency Vermont to extend their great program for thermal weatherization. And another big chunk of it went to a brand new partner in this effort, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, VHFA, which is funding a very innovative approach to on-bill financing that we think will lead to some really exciting new efforts and in an area that we really need to tackle on-bill financing for the future. So we have, so from there, we've been thinking about where do we go next? We have been focused on, oops. Just next slide for me. I'm going to keep going. We have six groups that have been work groups focused around a coalition. Our coalition are all the folks who are engaged in the weatherization at scale. Our 6 work groups work on different aspects of this. This group is very busy. For the better part of the year, we met every week as a steering team or coalition to advance this. Over the summer, we backed off. We meet once every other week. The work groups meet 1 to 3 times a month. But let's just say it's been busy. We ultimately want to do 3 things in the upcoming year. First, we want to make sure that policymakers understand the value of weatherization. We've heard about weatherization at scale already today. We think that they do. We want to keep weatherization at the table going forward. Secondly, and importantly, we need to increase that funding levels. This is about making sure that we're drawing down, whether it's ARPA money, federal money, clean heat standard funds that may be available, or other unique ways to do it. That's our second priority. Third priority is to build a multi-year framework to close the gap that will exist after we pull down all of those revenue sources. We need to make sure that we have a predictable and growing set of funding and finance options to keep weatherization moving strong into the future. I want to just close by saying this is an effort with a lot of people involved. I've said that, but we have had a great coalition here. I want to call out just a couple of folks who've done amazing work for us. And that is VHFA, our partner in the housing sector, who stepped up, EVT for their exceptional work year in, year out on this. Our friend Chris Bray, who's really, Senator Chris Bray, who's championing this in the legislature, and our efforts combined with our partners over in the Clean Heat Standard. And finally, the great work of EAN and all of our network action members who do this. We still need your support to move this forward. So I hope that if you're interested in weatherization at scale, know that the work continues, and we can use your help in the year and years ahead to be able to meet our ambitious goal. So with that, thank you very much.